The Russians continued to make attempts to regain lost positions at the front, but they were unsuccessful in their offensive on the Bakhmut and Kupiansk fronts yesterday. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 6 o'clock on the 12th of August. Quote, "Today at night, the 11th to the 12th of August, ed. The Russian Federation conducted another air attack with Iranian-made Shahed-136 131st strike UAVs on Ukraine. Information on the aftermath of this terrorist attack is currently being established. Details: Over the past day, the Russians launched 5 missile strikes, 31 airstrikes and 49 attacks using multiple launch rocket systems at the positions of Ukrainian troops and settlements. Unfortunately, Russian terrorist attacks have resulted in civilian casualties, both dead and injured, including children, as well as damage to residential buildings and other civilian infrastructure. Over 30 combat clashes took place over the last day. On the Severshina and Slobozhanshina fronts, the Russians launched mortar and artillery attacks on more than 20 settlements. On the Kupiansk front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive operations near Sinkivka and Ivanivka, Kharkiv Oblast. They launched airstrikes near Kyslivka and Pershotravnev, Kharkiv Oblast. Over 15 settlements came under Russian artillery and mortar fire. On the Lyman front, the Russian troops carried out airstrikes near Nevsky and Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast and Vesel, Zalizniansk and Klishivka in Donetsk Oblast. They bombarded more than 25 settlements. On the Bakhmut front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive operations near Bodanivka, Klishivka and Bilohorivka, Donetsk Oblast. More than 20 settlements were shelled by the Russians. On the Avdiivka front, Ukrainian defenders successfully repelled Russian attacks near Avdiivka, Donetsk Oblast, while under constant aircraft and artillery fire by the Russians. Over 10 settlements came under Russian artillery fire. On the Marinka front, the Ukrainian defense forces continue to hold back the offensive by Russian troops near Marinka, Donetsk Oblast. The Russians carried out airstrikes near Krasnohorivka, Marinka and Novomykhailivka, Donetsk Oblast. They also shelled over 10 settlements. On the Shakhtarsk front, the Russian troops failed to regain lost positions near Urozhain in Donetsk Oblast. The Russians launched an airstrike near Staromyorsk in Donetsk Oblast. The settlements of Vodian, Vuhledar, Bowaavlenka, Prekostivka, Zolotaniva and Blahodatna, Donetsk Oblast came under Russian artillery fire. On the Zaporizhia front, the Russians launched airstrikes near Novodanilivka and Orikhiv, Zaporizhia Oblast. The Russians bombarded more than 20 settlements. On the Kherson front, more than 25 settlements came under Russian artillery fire. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian defense forces are continuing to conduct offensive operations on the Melitopol and Berdyansk fronts, reinforcing their positions and carrying out counter-battery operations. Over the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian Air Force conducted a strike on the area where Russian military personnel, weapons and equipment were concentrated. They also shot down 4 reconnaissance operational tactical UAVs. Ukraine's rocket forces and artillery struck a Strela anti-aircraft missile system over the past day. Russia launches 24 airstrikes and 5 missile strikes on the 11th of August, General Staff report. Since the beginning of the 11th of August, 25 combat engagements have taken place on the front. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Details: During the day, the Russian occupiers launched 5 missile attacks, using 4 Kh-47 Kinjal aerial ballistic missiles. One of them was shot down, and 1 S-300 anti-aircraft missile. In addition, the Russians conducted 24 airstrikes and fired about 37 times from multiple launch rocket systems on the positions of Ukrainian troops and settlements. Unfortunately, the Russian terrorist attacks have resulted in civilian casualties, including children. Residential buildings and other civilian infrastructure facilities were damaged. There were 25 combat engagements over the last day. As for the hottest front, the Kupiansk front, the General Staff reported that the Russians had conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the area of Sinkivka and Ivanivka in Kharkiv Oblast. On the Bakhmut front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the areas of Bodanivka, Klishivka and Bilohorivka. On the Shakhtarsk front, Russian forces made unsuccessful attempts to regain lost positions near Urozhain, Donetsk Oblast. In turn, the Air Force carried out one strike on the area where Russian military personnel, weapons and equipment were concentrated over the course of the day. Ukrainian defenders also destroyed 4 operational tactical reconnaissance UAVs. Ukraine's rocket forces and artillery destroyed 1 Russian Strela anti-aircraft missile system over the course of the day. Russia downs 20 drones over Crimea following a spate of attacks on Moscow. Russia thwarted an attack by 20 Ukrainian drones targeting Moscow-annexed Crimea overnight, the Russian Defense Ministry said Saturday. 14 drones were shot down by Russian air defenses and a further 6 were jammed electronically, the ministry said in a Telegram post. No casualties or damage were reported. Kyiv officials neither confirmed nor denied Ukraine's involvement in the attacks. The overnight attacks followed 3 consecutive days of drone attacks on the Russian capital, Moscow. Firing drones at Russia, after more than 17 months of war, has little apparent military value for Ukraine, but the strategy has served to unsettle Russians and bring home to them the conflict's consequences. Drone attacks have increased in recent weeks both on Moscow and on Crimea, which Russia annexed from Ukraine in 2014, a move that most of the world considered illegal. Elsewhere, Russia claimed Saturday it had regained control of the village of Urozhain in Ukraine's easternmost Luhansk region in an overnight counterattack. A 73-year-old woman was killed early Saturday morning in Russian shelling of Ukraine's northeastern Kharkiv region, according to regional government. Oleh Syniehubov, Ukrainian Internal Affairs Minister Ihor Klemenko said a police officer was killed and 12 people wounded when a guided Russian aerial bomb hit the city of Orikhiv in Ukraine's partially occupied southern Zaporizhia region. 4 of the wounded were also police officers, he said. Local officials said explosions rang out Saturday morning in the central Ukrainian city of Kryvyi Rih, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown, but that there were no known casualties. On Ukraine's Black Sea coast, the city of Odessa opened several beaches for the first time since Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022. Odessa government Oleg Kuiper said that 6 beaches were open, but he stressed that accessing beaches during air raid alerts was forbidden. The strategic port and key hub for exporting grain has been subject to repeated missile and drone attacks, particularly since Moscow cancelled a landmark grain deal last month amid Kyiv's grinding efforts to retake its occupied territories, while Russian mines have regularly washed up on the city's beaches. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces reported on August 12 that Russia had lost 253,290 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of its full-scale invasion on February 24 last year. This number includes 510 casualties Russian forces suffered just over the past day.